Hey folks, and welcome back to Uldaman, Legacy of Tyr, the dungeon of choice today. So, again, because this is a Dragonflight dungeon, or a revamped dungeon for Dragonflight, we are running it with the Baby Warlock, and it is a 5-stack, so we're just going to blitz through this. There is a slight bit of tank not knowing pathing that we're going to see in this dungeon. They got confused by a loop, but other than that, it was a fairly fast run, only being about 12 minutes in length. So then, starting with any dangerous mobs that we need to be wary of. Basilisks, you need to be wary of spiked carapace. It's a low priority kick, so don't worry too much about it. You then have the geomancers that do chain lightning, which you do kind of want to kick because that will reduce the damage that the group takes. But spiked carapace basically just works as a thorns type effect, so you will take a little bit of damage if you're smacking them, but it's inconsequential in the grand scheme of things, so nothing to worry about there. The first boss, very early on in the dungeon, is Eric the Swift, Olaf, and Belrog, the three dwarfs. For those of you that remember Uldaman main, these boys are back. Each has their own mechanic. Focus Olaf, kicking defensive bulwark, and watch out for the cleave. Belrog, heavy arrow, you can't interrupt it, don't worry about that. And the goal here is to kill them all at roughly the same time. Otherwise you end up getting a lot of unnecessary damage. Obviously there is a bit of an imbalance here because the tank is on a go mission and no one was set up or prepared. So stacked cleave is going to be kind of your ideal DPS pattern for this fight, but there's nothing really too much. It still has its very much older man design in terms of the fight, and that goes for a lot of the bosses going forward. You can see that I'm just utilizing the Onyx Amulet and moving it into its own thing because I've got a single target and a AoE variant. As you can see, we've now got the AoE proc going on. Now, again, you have a couple of packs and then you go straight into Bromac. Bromac has two elements to this fight. One is groups of adds will spawn. You basically just kite the adds onto the geomancers that spawn, kite the boss there as well, and deal with that. Kicks are a premium, so you want to utilize your kicks to get everything grouped up so you continue AoEing. As you can see, this fight has been over-exaggerated by the tank just pulling the trash from in between bosses straight here, but you can kind of see the premise. There was also a totem that spawns, and you need to kill it. You need to kill it before Bloodlust. And this is because Bromark is essentially a shaman and will cause a bit of havoc if you let him kind of do his own thing. Now, as you can see here, I've actually stopped to just deal with these rock throwers because they will just constantly throw rocks. Think Neltharian's Lair and the Jagged Discs for the pelters. This is the same thing. You want to line of sight around pillars. So what I should have realistically done with this mage is stand to the corner of the stairs that you could see on the right hand side there, just down and out of line of sight. This would have pulled the rock throwers to us and would have allowed us to group and AoE everything up. Now, as you can see, tank is just on a mission, but the interesting thing about Uldaman is it is basically a boss rush. You can see that we have 5 bosses that we need to deal with, and there's not that much of intervening space between each boss, especially early on. You only have a couple of packs and then you're back into it. Now, Sentinel Telandros has 3 main notes that you need to bear in mind. You need to stack these orbs up, so you need to be stacked for this fight, not spread out like we are currently. But this is because we've just gotten in as the tanks pulled the boss. Again, one of the problems of being ranged and so far behind. Now, during a period of this boss fight, the boss will enrage. You kite him into the orbs to stun him. It removes a stack of the enrage. You can also use your own personal stuns like Shadow Fury, Hammer of Justice, Nova, Stormbolt, things like that to remove it, but the orbs are there for a reason, so do make use of them. And don't get knocked back into the orbs that have already been placed throughout the fight. That's all there is to it. You manage the enrage, you manage the stuns, and if you have the orbs stacked up relatively close to each other, then that makes the tank's life easier for that fight. Again, we end up in another situation where it's a quick pull through. This is an ideal point to do this if you can survive it, because then you get, obviously, all these casters grouped up in a nice way where you can do some AoE. Now, in this pack, you have a mix of Weavers, Warders, and a couple of Agents. The Agents have Hasten, which is a haste buff. Make sure you kick it. Curse of Stone from the Warders. Again, that will end up stunning you, as you're going to see later in this video. And then you have the Weavers that just do Hail of Stone. You can't kick Hail of Stone, as you can see there. It is a channeled ability that just launches rocks everywhere. This is how you stun them, fear them, horrify them, and do anything other than kick. Now, this is the point in the video that I discussed where the tank doesn't quite know what they're doing, and we're trying to point out, not this way, but we end up running in a circle, which is fine because it gives us a little bit of time to learn what these mobs do and kind of run around. You can see there that I typed out wrong way, but it's fine. Fine. Everyone's got to learn the dungeons at some point, and I suspect not a lot of people have actually run this dungeon at all. Unless you were maybe hunting for the caster trinket as a poor warlock at the start of the season 1. You can see them getting pelted by rocks. And interestingly enough, you can see that these pillars are not line of sight. They will not prevent this cast if you were to stand behind them, because I was still getting targeted from behind it. Deal with this last Custodian. Custodians are just melee-based adds. Don't need to worry about them. And then it takes us on to the next boss. So, around the circle we go a little bit. We've got a little bit of a run past some skitterlings and crawlers. These spiders just pounce. However, the seekers, the bats, do a silence, as you're about to see in a moment. Again, another ability where you just get AoE silenced. You do have to be wary of them. But again, we're already into the next boss room. So Emberon does a couple of things. So spread, cleave, and dot damage is a passive part of this fight. Plus, you also need to do damage to adds when they spawn. The adds won't spawn in this difficulty because, unfortunately, the boss dies too quickly. Moving around as a group is essential, and staying as a group on higher difficulties, so that this makes the healer's life far easier. But essentially, you deal with the AoE healing, dodge the fireballs on the ground, and then you deal with the adds when they spawn. They are a priority. Other than that, Emberon falls down really, really easily. Finally, moving on to the last push, essentially, of trash. You have Golems, Weavers. Again, this pack isn't anything particularly dangerous. Kick Stone Bolt, and then just stun Hail of Stone. The Colossus don't really do a whole hell of a lot. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing this particular run, as you're about to find out in a moment, even on heroic difficulty with a geared healer. Our healer was about 418, I believe. So massively overgeared this. You end up in a position where things get very, very sketchy. Those wardens have put up a barrier that also means that whatever's inside it is immune to stuns and CC, so you need to be wary. You can't stop the cast, you just have to move things out of it. But we're about to lose one of our players, and both our mages have ice blocked and now currently hypothermic. Aggro is at a premium. Try to get a kick in. My pet is once again dead. For some reason in this dungeon, my pet kept biting the dirt, so I don't have access to kick. If I was playing Affliction, it wouldn't really matter, but one of our mages has gone down, and I am very close to death myself, so I end up health potting. This is a very dangerous pull, so make sure that you do it differently. And you can see that these blessings of Tyr are what kind of make everything immune to CC. So those guardians, you need to be wary of. You can't CC them, you can't stop anything, you just have to be wary of them and obviously kite out. You can see there that I'm trapped in stone. And that was just Curse of Stone. It's a stun, but that stun can affect other people as well. And finally, we are at the agents, the infinite agents. Or agent, sorry. And these are the boys that cast Hasten, which is the buff that we discussed at the very start of the dungeon. There you can see it goes. And it is a magic debuff, you can dispel it. Mages will spell steal it, elves racial it, the like. Know how to handle this. And then the Time Reavers just apply a snare-like debuff to the target. So tanks, be wary, you are going to have your haste snared and impaired. But again, this pack falls fairly easily, and I suspect this will probably be where you pop cooldowns. The reason for this is because Chronoload Dios, although you want to save Lust for it because of a Soften Rage, during the rewind sections he will grant you a 50% haste buff. So starting this fight in a moment then, you do have a little bit of RP to bear in mind. So it'll be interesting to see what the time is like for this dungeon. But standard Dragonflight for the most part, you have breath, a tail, be wary of them, and then he puts these pools on the floor. Now, these pools are the Soft Enrage that you do have to be wary of, because eventually the room will fill up and they do damage when you're stood in them. However, as we discussed during the rewind stage that he's about to do, if you then stand in these exact same orbs, you can reduce the size of them, as I'm doing here, and also gain a huge haste buff. This means that that's going to kind of be your burst window for a lot of the time, and you will probably line your lust up with the first one. But that brings us to the end of the dungeon. Hopefully you've enjoyed, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care, folks, and have a good one.